Characters are crucial to a well-told story, and the art of character development can be extremely difficult because there are so many different ways to approach the issue. In Julia Alvarez's novel, In the Time of Butterflies, character development is established in two different ways. The Mirabal sisters, due to the close-knit relations that the Mirabal family upheld, help to tell each other's stories as well as their own. The tales of their lives are wound together in the playful twists of childhood memories and the elaborate turns of growing up in the same home. The sisters use different mediums to share their stories, including directly telling them and writing diary entries, but no matter how the stories are told, they are emotional, relatable, and extremely human. As each girl relates to their daily struggles and lifetime battles, the sisters place the reader into their everyday lives and make them a part of the Mirabal family, causing the reader to become more and more emotionally attached to characters that they already know will meet an untimely end and will suffer greatly along the way as they fight for their beliefs. In the postscript, Alvarez talks briefly about how she went about creating the characters of the Mirabal sisters. Because there is little proven information about the sisters, Alvarez decided to recreate the Mirabals so they were true to the spirit of the real Mirabals. But she chose to achieve this by fabricating the sisters' personalities so that they accurately fit the fighting, persevering women that Alvarez spent her young life grasping for new information about. Alvarez informs her readers that the sisters were deified in the Dominican Republic, and there were no clear accounts of their story. Therefore, while the sisters depicted in The Time of Butterflies are meant to show the legendary story of the Mirabal sisters, Alvarez makes sure to inform the reader that the sisters in her story are not true depictions of the Mirabal sisters, as there was so little to work with when it came to their stories. Alvarez takes the stories of the Mirabal sisters and turns them into a beautiful tragedy, taking the reader on an emotional roller coaster ride as she weaves together the curious beginnings of adolescence, the shy wonderings of first loves, the deep love for every child the girl's birth, and the incredible pain of loving a country that is being ruled by a man who loves only himself. As Didi, Patria, Maria Teresa, and Minerva's stories are portrayed, it is clear that the girls are strong-willed, courageous, loving individuals, and they always seem to be willing to stand up for what they believe to be right, no matter what the consequences may be. This characteristic of the sisters is especially clear when the girls refuse the pardons offered to them while they are imprisoned because they know that the entire Dominican Republic has heard their story and is looking to them for strength as the world grows less and less hopeful. The entire tale is told in the form of a story that Didi is retelling after the deaths of her sisters. Alvarez chooses to fashion the Mirabal tale of tragedy in a conversation between Didi and a journalist who comes to visit her after a visit to the Mirabal Museum. And while the pieces of the story are told by the sisters themselves through diary entries and through their own thoughts, they are also told in Didi's voice. Didi is responsible for the retelling of her sister's stories and the only Mirabal sister of the famous butterflies who survived to see the end of Trujillo's reign and the return of the conditions the Mirabal sisters had once known and gave their lives to bring back. Didi is given the difficult task of preserving the memories of her three sweet, incredibly strong sisters, and it is her voice that shines through to preserve, protect, and even to precede her sisters' memories. The technique that Alvarez chooses to employ only serves to deepen the emotional attachment the reader feels with the entire Mirabal family. As the book goes on, Alvarez creates the feeling that the Mirabal sisters are not just any sisters. They are the sisters of every person who reads their woeful tale, because the story is told from the perspective of a woman who was their sister and who did grow up by their side. Didi's retelling of the story that both haunts and comforts her leaves no story untold and grants the reader a glimpse into the kaleidoscope of the colorful, exciting, magical, and mischievous Mirabals. The Mirabal sisters cease to be a story on a page and come to life, becoming human and lovable, and causing the reader to ache as they read, knowing that in a short time these beautiful, loving creatures will be killed by a dictator who they fought so valiantly to remove from power. Alvarez also takes the time to develop the minor characters in the story, including the sisters' first love interests, their husbands, their family, and each of their children. The relationships between the sisters and each of the people they come into contact with throughout the novel help to show the kind of people that the Mirabals truly were. The most striking relationship shown in the book is the relationship between the Mirabal sisters and their half-sisters, the illegitimate children that their dear father had chosen to have with his mistress, in hopes of producing a male child. Although each sister had a hard time with the situation at first, the sisters eventually come to terms with their father's choices, and the girls even made the decision to help pay for the education of their half-sisters. Between that relationship and the tender relationships that the sisters have with each other, their mother, and their father, it is clear that the Mirabal sisters are lovers, and not truly fighters, but they will not hesitate to fight for the people and the country they love. Las Mariposas are an inspiration for their country. They are fighters, they are lovers, they are passionate, they are unreserved, they are strong and will not be silenced. They are faithful to their husbands and loving towards their children. They are religious, even when it is hard to believe that there could ever be a God after such heartbreak and horror. The butterflies are the picture of what the Dominican Republic needs most, as Trujillo captures their family members and destroys the foundations they have built in their country. The butterflies are hope in the face of despair. They are sunlight in the midst of a storm. They represent good people, loving people, hopeful people, in a country where it seems that life will never be good again, and in a time when it seems that all hope has been lost. Alvarez takes the story of four sisters who stood up for their country in its time of need, and turned it into a story of hope for women everywhere, no matter what the injustice they are facing. And to this day, many Latin American countries celebrate the anniversary of their deaths as the International Day Against Violence Towards Women. As stated in her postscript, Alvarez states that the Mirabal sisters were real women. There is little documentation to go off of, and the majority of their story is passed down as legend, and yet Julia Alvarez was captivated by the story. Alvarez was a citizen of the Dominican Republic at the time of Trujillo's reign, and the story she crafts is interspersed with her own experiences in Trujillo's famous La Forty, and her knowledge about the situation in her country at the time of Trujillo's despotic rule. As Alvarez points out, a novel is not, after all, a historical document, but a way to travel through the human heart. She writes the story of the Mirabal sisters not only as a woman who is passionate about their story, but as a woman who lived in the same terror that they did for the first few years of her life. The Mirabal sisters are crafted as real women, which is the most endearing part about them. Julia Alvarez does not paint the picture of perfect women who have lived perfect lives. They too have heartaches. Alvarez fought to avoid dismissing the challenge of their courage as impossible for us, ordinary women and women. Because of this thought process, Alvarez uses events like miscarriage, sexual exploration, rebellion, and the discovery of their father's illegitimate children to make the sisters real to their audience, and to promote the idea that the strength of Patria, Didi, Minerva, and Mate is a strength that we all have buried inside of us, even when we are afraid we have none. As the famed sisters struggle with depression, stubbornness, loss of faith, and varying degrees of grief, they become people that the reader can relate to and people that the reader can aspire to become more like. Their lives are a beautiful reminder that people can accomplish anything with the right amount of spunk, and that the convictions of the heart are stronger than any despot, tougher than any one man, and more valuable than 1,000 men devoted to a terrible cause.